Welcome to the home of lethbridgerealestate.com and the Godlonton Group. Today Ryan and I are going to be doing a little role playing to show you what we do for our clients. We do everything different than every other real estate company, and we want to show you how that works.
So I'm going to be doing the buyer presentation. So what it is, we just kind of go through the whole process, how we get to know you guys, how we discover your dreams, your goals, and all your needs and wants.
And I'm going to take over and I'm going to do the seller's portion, explain to you how we position you in the best possible light in the marketplace and what we do that sets us apart from every other realtor.
Hi, you must be Miles.
Good to meet
I'm
you.
Ryan, nice to meet you.
Okay.
Come on in. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to come in and meet with me today. So what we like to do is we really want to get a better understanding of what your goals are, what you were looking for in a home, and get an idea of, how this play map is going to look for you. How we're going to build this roadmap so we make sure that you're in the home you want to be in the timeline you want to be in. So what we're going to jump into now is what we call what you need to know. So the point of this is that in the market that we're in, and really realistically any market that you're going to go into when you're buying, whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market, there's a lot of stuff that you're going to want to know. A lot of terminology and just the whole concept of what real estate is. So we got a form here that we like to go through, and we call it what you need to know. So the stuff with asterisks we're really going to touch on, and the other stuff are just some normal terminology that we use on a day-to-day basis that you might not be familiar with. Okay. So the first one is real estate disclosure. So what that is this is a consumer relationship guide. So there's 3 different types of relationships you can have with a realtor like myself. The first one is common law agency. The second one is a designated agency, and then there's the consumer relationship. So what that means is common law is what we are at lethbridgerealestate.com. So when you're actually hiring me, you're not really hiring me, you're hiring lethbridgerealestate.com to actually represent you in this purchase. Designated would be when you're actually hiring an individual. Now the difference would be at Lethbridge Real Estate, if I happen to be away on holidays or I'm not able to get you into a home in the timeline that you have, I can call one of my associates in the office and they can take care of you. Now if you were in designated, I'd have to get you to sign a piece of paper to say that this other person in the office could help you out. So that's kind of the difference there. And we'll get more in depth about what that means, because sometimes we can run into conflict of interest, and I'll explain that more here in a second. And the last one would be a consumer relationship. So that would be when basically you're representing yourself, and I'm here just to give you, show you where to sign, and I'm really not here to represent you at all. You're taking care of that all yourself. And we'll go into a little bit more depth on that. So if you do decide to hire me or lethbridgerealestate.com as your representative, there's certain fiduciary duties we owe to you. The first one would be undivided loyalty. So we need to promote your interest above our own. Full disclosure. So that means anything that's, could affect the transaction, whether it has to be with the house or the neighborhood or anything like that, whether it's this big or this big, we need to disclose that at all times. Confidentiality. Anything that's said between us during this transaction and for life is kept confidential. And then the fourth one would be obedience. So at the end of the day, you're the boss. I'm here to help you, give you as much information as I can, but at the end of the day, you're the boss and I need to follow your lawful instructions. Reasonable care and skill. So that's kind of a funny one. Everybody kind of raises their eyebrows when you hear that because, we all think that we're reasonably cared and skilled in our jobs. But when you look at somebody like, my dad's been doing this for 49 years, and you look at myself, I've been doing this for 6. There's a different level, right? He's going to know a little bit more than I know. So what I always say is that I'm never going to tell you something I don't know. If I'm not sure of the answer, what I'll do is I'll express all my options to find that answer for you. We got tons of experience in our office, and there's usually always somebody in our office that's gone through something that we're going to go through. So I'm always able to find that answer out for you. And the last one is full accounting. So any money that's left in trust with us, we always are accounting for it, and we know where it is at all times. Any questions on those?
I think so.
So then we get into the consumer relationship. So this would be when you're representing yourself. Now, what happens here is basically I can give you statistical information and show you where to sign. I can't help you negotiate. I can't help you do anything. So really, you're on your own, and it's not always the best situation to be in. So what can happen though, when I was talking about common law and designated, so there's always a potential of conflict of interest. Now what that means is that if we're out on the street and we're looking at one of my listings, one of lethbridgerealestate.com's listing, that's not a conflict of interest. Now if we become interested and we want to write Now we might have a conflict of interest because we're representing the seller and we're also representing you, the buyer. So what that means is that we have to be a little bit more neutral, and what we become is a transaction facilitator. So we kind of ride the middle line a little bit more. We're still here to help you negotiate, write the purchase contracts the way we want to make sure that you're protected, but we can't use insider information. Like if I know that something, that maybe the seller's willing to take less than they're saying on paper, or you're willing to pay more than what you're putting on paper, we can't disclose those types of things. We stay a little bit more neutral, and we're not here to put each other in a fight. We want to make sure that the buyer and the seller come together in agreement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you don't have any other questions about the conflict of interest that may arise, and there's a whole nother forum when we get to that situation so that you really understand. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, what we can do is we can actually refer you out of our office to another real estate company, and they can look after you. Doesn't happen very often because at the end of the day, the buyer wants to buy, the seller wants to sell, and we're here to put it together.
Yeah, well, the reason I came is because a friend of mine dealt with you, and so I want to deal with you.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that, and we always do our best to make it work, but you never know until you get into that situation, and we go through it way more in depth when we get into that situation. So if you don't have any questions about that, I'll get you to sign down here.
Okay.
So, and anything that you sign today, you're going to make sure you get a copy of it and take it home. So the next one is on the list here is actually, it's called deposit money. Are you familiar with what deposit money is?
Yeah, I understand that because I talked to the banker.
Oh, okay. That's a little bit different. So that's actually your down payment.
Okay.
Okay. So on a purchase contract, we always need to have a deposit money on the purchase contract, and we'll go in a little bit more in depth because there's a section called how to buy right, and we'll go into a little more depth. But this is when we're talking about that full accounting. We always account for that deposit money. So what's going to happen is you're going to give us a check, and it's going to sit in a trust account during the time that we're actually in the condition stage. Now, if we don't remove conditions, that money goes back to you. But if we do, then it goes into and forms part of that deposit, down payment money.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Mortgage approval. Well, you already told me that you've already been down and seen Linda at the mortgage center, so that's fantastic. She's one of the best in the business. So we know you've gone through this process, but basically what it is that you went and met with her, gave her all your financial information,
Yeah,
and
she's
it's a mountain of stuff, right? And it's a lot different than what happens when you go online, because if you go online to CIBC, you can just type in a few things, the next thing you know, you're pre-qualified to go buy a house. Now, what you did with Elinda, that's mortgage approval. That's a pre-approval letter, not pre-qualified, right? It's a big difference there. The buyer profile, so that's what we did at the beginning. Me understanding what your needs and wants are, that's what we did at the beginning. So we already got that one done. So the appraisal process, so what happens after we write the offer? So the bank, all the information is going to go to Elinda, and then she's going to forward that off to the bank. Now sometimes the bank needs an appraisal done. Now there's two different types. There's the postal code style, where they just punch in the postal code into their system, and it generates an auto-populated value. Now if it's within their range, no need to send out a certified appraiser. Now, if it's not, then they actually will hire a certified appraiser, which is going to end up costing you a little bit extra, and we're going to go into that as well. But they'll actually go out and physically look at the property, take pictures, take notes, go back to the office, and then do a deep dive to make sure that the value you have on your piece of paper, what our purchase price is, matches up to what the appraiser says. Because the bank needs to know that you're not overpaying as well, because they're the one that's going to have to come up with that money if, in a worst case scenario, you default. Does that make sense?
Okay.
The other one here we got is title insurance, and then there's a real property report. So both of these kind of fall in line with each other. So title insurance is basically an insurance policy if we can't get an RPR. Now, an RPR is a surveyor it's a survey of the land. So it shows
That's the real property report?
That's the real RPR.
Okay.
Sorry. And I used some short term there, but yes, the real property report, or also known as the surveyor's certificate. So what they do is they go out and they physically measure from each corner of the house and make sure you're within the guidelines that the city puts in place for your setback waivers and setback agreements, all that kind of stuff. Shows you where the utility right of way is, all that kind of good stuff. So it's a very, very important piece of paper. We always strive to get this for our buyers, but sometimes it doesn't always happen and we have to use title insurance. Like if we were looking at a new home, almost every single builder in the city right now is only giving out title insurance, not an RPR. So, but we can always cross that bridge. But we're always trying to fight to get this piece of paper because it's about $800 to $900. So it's an expensive piece of paper. Offer to purchase, we're going to go over that in a little bit more depth when we talk about how to buy right too. So possession date and adjustment date. Now normally these two fall in line with each other. So possession date is actually the date that you move into the property. Adjustment date is the day you start paying for it. So, you know, obviously you live in Lethbridge, so it's a little bit different. More than likely, these two will align. But if you have somebody that's coming from, you know, out of province, they might actually own the property before they physically move into the property. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So then we got local improvement assessment. And you know what that is?
Not a clue.
So what that would be is, you ever driven down an alley and it's all gravel, and then you go to the next block and it's all paved?
Okay.
So that would be a local improvement assessment. So everybody on the block got together and went to the city and say, hey, we want to pave this alley. Well, what the city does is they go in and they pave it, but they spread out that value of what it costs onto each property that's backing onto that alley. So I'm able to find out through my system if there is a local improvement assessment in place and how long it's going to be there for. Because that's, you know, it's going to add some money to your property taxes every year. So then we get into PI or PIT. Now, does that make sense to you?
Not a clue.
So what that is short terms is it's principal and principal, interest, and tax. So it's the way you set up how you pay your mortgage. So you could just go with principal and interest, or if you add that T, which is the tax, the mortgage company actually collects all your property tax money for you. Yep. So it's just one payment, and then when you get that bill from the city and you say, hey, you owe us $5,000, and you get freaked out, yeah, you're good because the mortgage company's been setting it aside for you.
Linda's going to set me up on the tax portion.
It's normally the way it goes. It's usually, and it's most efficient and you know, just takes out a lot of guessing game. So then we get into the property tax adjustment. So what happens is, you know how taxes are paid in Lethbridge?
No.
So what happens is on June 30th, the property taxes get paid 6 months in arrears and 6 months in advance. So that means if we end up moving in, you know, because we're already in June, so realistically, the chances are we're going to be moving in somewhere in July or August, you know, maybe into September. But what happens is this seller actually went and paid the full amount in taxes all the way up to the end of the year. And then he also paid backwards. So if we move in after June 30th, there's going to be a tax adjustment where we're going to have to owe the seller some money for the months that he's already prepaid for compared to when he's not living there. Does that make sense?
So that comes out of my expense money?
Yeah, so there's another form we're going to go through, and it's called extra expenses. And what we've done is we've built in all these extra little expenses because, you know, you're sitting with your down payment, but you need to have a little bit of a cushion after that because there's going to be your property tax adjustments. Maybe you need to get the appraisal done. And the home inspection's going to be another expense. So we've broken it down so you can actually see and have a real good budget to make sure that you're not eating KD when you move in on August 1st and swearing at me and calling me and say, you didn't tell me about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Does that make sense though? How the taxes are adjusted?
Yeah.
So if we moved in prior to June 30th, it'd be the opposite because we'd have to pay on the adjustment. We'd still have that expense, but we'd be paying forward. And he would actually owe, or he or she would actually owe us for the months they own the property. Okay. So it's an adjustment of a credit, and this is an adjustment of a payment. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So then there's also a property tax account. So now if you were on a PI and you wanted to set up a property tax account with the city, so they actually were holding the money for the property taxes, because there's three ways to do it. You can either do it with your mortgage company, you can set up an account with the city, or you can just do a one-time payment. Now, not everybody can afford a one-time payment of, you know, because most taxes in the city are, the cheapest around, if you're looking at a detached house, would be around $3,000, but you could be creeping into that $5,000-$6,000 range. So that's a big bill. So it's always highly suggested when you start your mortgage, you go with the PIT, but you can also set up a property tax account with the city as well. That's another option. Legal description. You know what a legal description is?
No.
So, you know, you take into account a 1509 9th Avenue North. Well, there's another one on the south side as well. So what they do is they actually make a unique number for each home in the city so that it identifies that property in and of itself, not by the physical address, by the actual legal description, to make sure that you're actually buying the property you're interested in. So buyer's responsibilities, expenses, and responsibilities. So this is a form that I'm going to let you take home with you. But what it does is, what we've done is we've talked to all the people that kind of, are involved with it, from the lawyers to the mortgage people, but home insurance, utilities, cost of opening up accounts. We've really broken it down so that once you kind of look at this sheet and you follow our guideline, when you're looking at buying a house between $300,000 and $500,000, which we're kind of in that range, we always suggest around $35,000 to $5,000 above and beyond your down payment. So if you got 20, you want to make sure you got about 25. Because that way, when you move in, you're not going to be out of pocket. Or when you go see a lawyer and sign off, you're not going to get slapped in the face with a big surprise of an extra $3,000 you weren't expecting. Okay. So this really helps break it down. And the two biggest expenses that you're going to incur above and beyond are going to be your legal fees and your tax adjustment. And the tax adjustment one is the big one. Because if we're getting closer to that top end of your price point in that $400 to $450, that's when the taxes really start climbing. You're going to be looking at least $4,000 to $6,000 worth of property taxes. So that could be a real big expense. But you got to remember that we're always half a year. We're not paying for that. Okay. We're not paying for that full bill, but we need to be prepared that we need to do some and then have the bank account set up too, right? So I'm going to let you take this home with you. There is on the back side here, we got cleaning costs. Now, some people kind of think it's a little funny, but in a perfect world, when you buy your house, it's going to be spick span. But everybody's definition of clean is completely different. So, and we found that when we put it in the purchase contract, sometimes people can get really offended about putting in there something about, it needs to be really, really clean. Because everybody has their own definition. And when we're talking about money and we're talking about negotiation, the last thing we want to do is offend. Right? It's okay to go in low and try and play the game and do the best we can to get the best purchase price. But when you start talking about how people live, people can get a little bit pushed back, right? So my suggestion is, if you plan on moving in, let's say you take possession on the 2nd. If you plan on taking possession on the 2nd, I would plan on moving in on the 3rd or the 4th and have everybody lined up for those days. Because when we go and see it on the 1st, if it's not exactly the way you want it, you don't have to try and rearrange your whole life, and we're able to get some cleaners in there
that's a good idea.
and be able to get it perfect, because the last thing you want to do is try and move in on the 2nd, but you got to clean the house before you get there. You got moving guys sitting outside. It can create, it happened to me, and this is a life lesson I learned. It's not something you want to do. You don't want your wife in the kitchen scrubbing for 8 hours. Trust me, that's not a first good night's sleep in your new home. Okay. So this could be an extra expense as well. So I always prepare us, and when we look at
when do we get to check the house before we move in?
Yeah, so we also do we always do a walkthrough prior to possession. So we write it in the contract that we're able to go back in 24 hours prior to possession to make sure that it's in the same.
After they're out.
Yeah, they're going to be out. They're going to be moved out already, and we're going to go back and make sure that it's in the same, relative the same condition that it was when we made the offer. Now, that doesn't really talk about cleanliness. That means they didn't go and knock holes in the walls, or they didn't do a midnight move of fridges and stuff like that were included in the contract. But this one is just one of these ones that could be an extra expense, right? Because when we go and look at the house and it's perfect, I can guarantee you it's not going to be perfect when we move in, because they're trying really hard to keep that house clean to show it the best way they can. But once everything's said and done, and they just spent a week and a half packing and moving, the last thing they're doing is grabbing out a toothpick and getting every fine-tuned coat. So
do you have cleaners?
Oh yeah, we got a list of cleaners, and we got real good referrals, and that's why we do that 24-hour pre-heads up, because we got people in our pocket that we're able to call on short notice and make things happen for you. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Perfect. I'll just get you an initial this. You're going to be able to take this home, just so you know that my boss, when he checks my paperwork, I actually did my job. Okay. So then we get into, this one is interim financing. Now this one, you're not going to run into this because this is your first home. Right. So what this means though is that if you actually had a house that you needed to sell, and you're buying at the same time, and you bought the house prior to actually getting the money from the sale, there'll be interim financing or bridge financing. That's just carrying two mortgages at one time, but it's not an issue for this actual one. Professional home inspector. Have you heard much about home inspections?
No, the bank and Linda kind of mentioned that as something that we should look at getting done.
Absolutely, you know, and they're great to have because realistically, especially in the market we're in right now, we're probably only going to be able to spend maybe 15 to 35 minutes tops in each house that we're looking at. And we're not always able to get a second viewing. So it's pretty hard to go through that house with a fine-tuned comb and really see all the little nuances. So it's a very beneficial thing to get done. And we're always told to help you, we're always told for you guys, buyers, to get one to kind of protect everybody. Now, the thing you got to understand about home inspectors is that they got disclaimers at the end of every sentence. So they're going to say, yeah, the roof looks good, but it's to the best of my knowledge. Consult a roofer. Or the furnace looks good, but consult a professional in that industry. So if we go in and we see we got an old furnace or the roof's kind of looking a little weak, we can also make sure that we write it in that we are going to get inspections on those particular items by professionals in their industry, because what home inspectors can't do is they can't give you replacement cost. They can tell you that, hey, this is looking not so good, this is a maintenance issue, but they can't give us a definitive number on what's it going to cost to remedy the fact. So we can put it in there saying, hey, we want a roofer to come in and inspect the roof, we want the furnace inspected, those types of things, and still have the general inspection of the whole property.
So will you be able to help me with that, like when we're going through the house, pointing those things out?
Oh, absolutely. So this is one of the big reasons that I like to cover this form itself, because we're going to cover a lot of the questions that you're going to have right before we write the offer inside of this. While you're looking at the house, I'm looking at all the defects. I'm kind of like mom and dad. I'm here to beat up the house and point out all its flaws, because there's no perfect house out there. Okay? So I always try and be mom and dad when I'm dealing with my first buyers, because this is a huge experience for you. And the last thing you need to do is be worried about all the nuances. You need to make sure the home's right for you. I'm here to help you find all the bad things. Same with the home inspector and same with mom and dad. If they want to come down for the viewings, if they're going to be helping you co-sign, we need to get them involved in the showings as well, because they're going to want to see it before you write that offer, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. So there's different types of mortgage types here. So we have a conventional, a high ratio. Do you know what the difference is between those?
I think Linda explained that, because I'm putting down 10%.
Okay, so you're going to be in the high ratio. So
Right.
what that means is that anything when you're putting down less than 20%, that's a high ratio. Now what that means is that you need an insurance company to back your mortgage. So it's an extra cost on your mortgage, but you usually get a better interest rate because the mortgage company is not taking all the risk. They have an insurance company also on the line taking some risks. So
It's not my insurance.
it's not your insurance, but you pay for it to back the mortgage company. Okay. Conventional is when you're putting more than 20% down. So you don't need that insurance. Okay. So a little bit less of a monthly cost, but your interest rates usually go up higher. And then there's different types of payments you can do. You can do monthly, you can do bi-weekly, or you can do weekly payments. So it's always, and I'm sure Linda told you this too, but
we're going to do bi-weekly.
yeah, the more payments, and you can actually do, there's actually another one that's excelled bi-weekly, because every once in a while when you get that 29th day, you ended up getting, you can do an extra, you can get a 13th payment in there. So it just, the more times you pay down, the more times you hit your principal, the faster you pay off your mortgage, the less interest you're going to pay. So if you can afford weekly, fantastic. You're going to pay 52 times compared to your 12 to 13. Or your 12, right? So you're hitting that principal more times throughout the year. And then you get into amortization and terms. So amortization is the whole length of the mortgage, and terms is how short you locked in. So typically you're around 3 to 5 years that you lock in at an interest rate, and at that point in time when it comes to maturity, you get to go back and see Linda and see if you can renegotiate or get a better interest rate or see what the market's doing. A lot of people 3-4 years ago wish they would have signed into a 10-year because they're sitting at 2% and everybody's renewing. So nobody's got the crystal ball, but you gotta pick what's going to fit you best for the next 5 years. Does that make sense?
Okay.
How to buy right, we're going to cover that here at the very end. Chattels, do you know what chattels are?
No.
So chattels are actually everything that's in the house that's going to stay, but that's not actually physically attached. So your fridge, your stove, your washer, your dryer. Okay. It's just a really fancy name for things that are going to stay.
Okay.
Utility right away, I kind of touched on that when we were talking about the real property report. So what that is the city always owns the right of way to get the utilities and services to your home. So your sewer lines, your electrical lines, your gas lines, all that stuff. That's technically their land because they need to service these lots. So what that means is that if you...
Do they pay part of my taxes?
Yeah, in a perfect world, yeah, but unfortunately not. Even if you're at a boulevard, you're responsible for mowing the boulevard, but it's technically their land. So it's city. It's the city. We don't need to go there. But what that means though is if you go and build something on top of that utility right away, then you're not supposed to. Now, if you go and build something and they got to come in and service that line, they come in, they service. It's like going through the border. They want to rip apart your car, they rip apart your car, and then it's your problem to put it back together. It's the same concept here.
Okay.
So it's real important. That's why this is an important piece of paper, because when you go to do any additions or you want to add a deck or anything like that, it's really nice to have that piece of paper because you know where everything is. You're also going to call, ATCO and make sure you're not digging into something that you're not supposed to. But that's what a utility right of way is. Do you know what an easement is?
No.
So it's not very often you run into easements in the cities, but it happens a lot in like cottages and lakefront properties, because normally what happens is way back in the day, somebody would have had a road and they owned that road and land going to their back of their house, but then they subdivided and made extra lots going down the road, getting back to the main road. So they still own that road, but on title, what they say is that you have right to use their road to access your property. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's why we don't run into it in the city very often. GST. So GST is only payable when you're looking at brand new homes. Resale market, there is no GST.
Okay.
Okay, so not a big deal there. Credit report, that ties into your mortgage approval process.
Hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, exactly. And then restrictive covenant. You know what those are? So have you ever driven around, what's a good example? If you go into Tudor. Have you been to Tudor Estates?
By the college?
Yeah, over by the college,
Yeah,
absolutely.
okay.
So when you're driving down that road, everybody kind of looks very similar. They have the same type of roof materials, they got the same type of driveways, the color schemes are all very similar. Did you notice that? So that's a restrictive covenant. So you can't go in there and paint your house pink. So the developer of the land put restrictive covenants on title saying you're only allowed to use these type of materials and you can't do certain colors. Now, when you go into the old side of north side, you can have lime green, you can have hot pink, you can have 2 stories, bungalows, all different types of homes. So that's when you don't get into the restrictive covenants. So you get a little bit more freedom in the older areas. Any questions about all that? I know that was a lot of information. I don't expect you to remember it all, but as we're going through homes and we're looking at stuff, a lot of these terms are going to pop into your head and go, oh, yeah, I remember that.
So I get to take this with me?
Yeah, the buyer's expenses, that's going to come back with you as long as that, as well with that consumer
I
relationship.
might come up with some questions later.
Oh, 100%, yeah, anytime. Day or night, I'm always available.
Okay.
I'll just get you an initial that. And then like I say, you're going to take this home as well. So you got any questions if something pops up? So we're going to jump into how to buy right. So this is actually the real estate, residential real estate purchase contract. So we're just going to kind of briefly run through the highlight points here. So when we're talking about legal description, this is where that legal description goes. It's going to have your municipal address, but then it's going to have the actual legal description. Make sure we're buying the right house. That chattels areas we were talking about. So these are all the things the seller is going to include in the purchase price. Typically it's your fridge, stove, washer, dryers, those types of things that are going to stay. Now, one thing we always suggest, sometimes it's a wedding present, those washer and dryers, and they really want to keep them, or they just purchased them, so they're not always including everything that you want. But at the end of the day, our goal is to try and get that price as low as possible or beat out competition, especially in the market we're in. It's usually trying to beat out other offers. So if they're not offering absolutely everything that we want, we always suggest that we don't ask for extras right off the bat. The goal is to get them to work with us and get the best price possible. So that's where this happens, and that's the purchase price. So this section right here.
How much do I usually, what would you recommend? If they're asking 400, where would I go in at?
It's one of those situations where, if it's a brand new house in the market, maybe there's 5 or 6 showings, and we find out that we're going to be in competition. That's one of those things where we got to sit down and say, hey, did they price this right? Did they price it aggressively low to try and get multiple offers? So we do a deeper dive and make sure that the number that we decide to put on the paper is a number we're comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, when we're getting into competition and competing offers, we're always going to be guaranteed by the bank that that number needs to make sense. Now, if those two numbers don't jive, we need to come up with a decision because the bank's not going to fork over extra money. So either we got to come up with extra money or we got to walk away from the purchase. But
can we go back to the owner then?
we could go back to the owner, but as soon as we try and negotiate again, what can happen is that they can either accept our negotiation, they can say no, or they can actually back out of the deal because we changed something. So when we're trying to figure out what that perfect number is, that's when we do a deeper dive. Now, if it's something that's been sitting on the market for a long time, and a long time in today's market is that, 20 to 45 days, which is crazy because normal markets we're 60 to 90 days to have a house sell, but we just got no inventory right now. That's when we can maybe potentially go in and try and negotiate and try and find out. And the one thing I always tell you is I don't care what the number is, and I don't care if we're in competition. If it's at 400 and you want to go in at 380, the reality is if we're in competition, we're not going to get it. But that's when we go back to obedience. You're the boss, right? Okay. So what you say goes. But we also just got to be realistic that if we're going into a competing offer situation, unless they way overprice something, there's very realistically, it's going to be hard to negotiate down. It's going to be trying to negotiate, get them to accept our offer.
Yeah, I had a friend that had to pay more than asking.
Yeah, and unfortunately, especially in the price point from 300 to 500, we're almost always in competition. There's a lot of buyers out there right now, and there's very, very little on the market. For example, I just looked this morning, detached homes under 400, there's 16 in Lethbridge. 16 houses in Lethbridge. Like, I think there's more than 16 buyers on the road right now.
Yeah.
So when we got a population of 100,000, so inventory is crazy low. It's about trying to get our offer accepted by the seller so they work with us and we're not trying to, we're beating out everybody else.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay, so what are you going to do to help me there?
Well, we're going to go through this and I'm going to show you all the little tricks that we've learned over the years to make the seller pick our offer over everybody else's.
Okay.
Okay? So that's step one. Don't ask for extras.
Okay.
If they're not giving you the washer dryer, don't ask them right away. Just take what they're willing to give because the goal is to get the house and get the house at the best price or beat out everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay? So the next one here is possession date. So the possession date, what we like to do, and especially if you're flexible on your move-in, I know you're living with mom and dad right now, so you're not in a residential lease or anything like that, so you're pretty flexible. So what we like to do is that we actually try and leave this blank. And the reason we leave it blank is not very often that the seller gets to choose when they get to move. And that can be a huge one. It can mean nothing or it can mean the whole world. Because if the wife of the family's got to organize, they're moving to Leduc and they got to get into school and they got a whole bunch of other things, that possession date could make or break this, the purchase. Okay. So it could be really huge. And the beauty about it is that as soon as they put a date in here, we need to accept it. So if it doesn't jive with our timeline or if we can't make it work, then we'll try and mold it the best way we can to make them satisfied. Okay. But this also is, I can almost guarantee you, every other offer they're going to see is going to have the buyer's possession date, not the seller's possession date.
I can flexible there.
Yeah, so you can see why that could be very, very important.
Okay.
Or it might not mean anything, but we don't know, right? So then we get on to this page here. Now this is where we talk about that deposit money. Okay, so what happens here is we always try and suggest 3% minimum of the purchase price. So if we can...
So, yeah, if I'm putting down 20% at 400, so...
yeah, you got that 20 sitting in the bank ready to rock and roll, So it's no big deal if we try and pull that money out and use 10 or 15, right? Because just you got to remember is this is always your money while we're under the conditionary position, right? So while we still have conditions on the offer, that money's just held in trust with the real estate company. Okay, so if we find out something that we don't like about the house, or numbers don't jive, or we can't come to terms, then we walk away, and that money comes back to you. So it's always your money, even though it's not in your bank account.
But if I put down a good deposit, that'll help me in negotiations.
It's gonna. The higher the number here, you're going to stand out. So let's say we had 10,000, because the reality is a lot of people that are going to write offers in our price point are probably tops looking at 5. Like, they're going to probably be between 3,000 and 5,000. So when we have a blank possession date, we're not asking for extras, and we got a $10,000 here, just on the first 2 pages, we're already looking better than every other offer. So then we get on to conditions. So we always try and keep this as tight as possible. And we're always got to make sure that you're protected though at the same time. So we got our financing condition, which is going to be Linda's job. So we're going to usually take about 8 to 10 business days to get that done. And then
She said she'd give me a letter.
Oh yeah, she's going to send me a copy of that letter too, because what we like to do is we actually like to include that in our purchase contract. So we included, when we send in our offer, we actually send in our pre-approval saying, hey, we've done our job, Linda's done her job, now it's up for the house and for the mortgage company to sign off on everything that Linda's done, right? And that's why it's so crucial to be with somebody, a mortgage broker that's very good at their job and very skilled, because the reality is, no matter whether it's pre-qualification or pre-approval, the mortgage company never sees you until you have this in place. Okay, so it's all on that mortgage broker or that banker to do their job properly to ensure that they've pre-approved you the right way. Okay. And the honesty between you guys. You didn't hide anything, right? Because sometimes that happens. So that's usually about 8 to 10 business days. Now, we have the property inspection condition. So right here when it says satisfaction, that's a pretty loose word, satisfaction. You know, I don't like the light switches. Well, that's not satisfactory. We can walk away. It's pretty loose. So we have this other form here. It's called a home inspection schedule. And what it's talking about is that we're willing to accept whether it's a dollar value or it's an actual percentage of the purchase price. So sometimes we use dollar values like $2,000 to $3,000 or 1% of the purchase price. So if it was $400,000, it'd be $4,000. So what we're saying is that we're willing to accept defects in the property up to a certain dollar value or percentage of the purchase price. And what that shows the seller is that you're serious about the home. Because I could send a home inspector into a brand new home that just got built yesterday, and he'd come out with a laundry list of things that might not be satisfactory, right? There's no perfect house out there. The point of the home inspector is to come in and identify big things that we might have missed. The furnace is shot, or the roof looked good, but there's actually some water leakage going on. So some big expenses that we did not see when we walked through the property. That's the job of the home inspector, right? But every other offer that the seller's gonna look at, they're gonna look at satisfactory to the buyer. Now, when you come in and you say, I'm willing to accept a certain amount of defects, it just can't exceed a certain ceiling. You know, you make yourself look a lot serious, a lot more serious than the next guy. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know, because like you say, there's no perfect house out there, but the point of the home inspector is to identify the big things.
So if I'm reading this right, you're trying to make our offer look as good as it possibly can look.
Absolutely. That's the whole key. So these are all the things that we're trying to do to ensure that we get the best purchase price or we beat out every other offer they're going to look at. Okay? So, and that's kind of this spot right here is where we talk about the other terms. So this is where we would include our pre-approval letter, our home inspection schedule. So we wouldn't even use this clause. We'd just get rid of it and we'd add our own new clause. Okay? So when you look at, hey, we're willing to accept a certain amount of defects, we've got a pre-approval letter. We're coming in with
So if the home inspector comes back and it looks like, and we talk to the tradespeople, and it's going to be over that 1%, can we go back to the seller then?
100%. That's when we get the ability to renegotiate. So again, it's the same kind of concept as what we talked about before. We can renegotiate. The seller has the option to say yes or no, or walk away. Or we could decide to walk away. Maybe it's a defect that you're not willing to accept, right? So that's when we need to weigh out that. And that's why we always try and do the home inspection, because we got the pre-approval process in place. So we know that we're solid. So we always try and get that done a little bit earlier rather than later, because if there is issues, we got time to get the roofer in. We got time to get that furnace guy in to make sure we understand exactly what we're doing and exactly what the costs are going to be, and the ability to maybe renegotiate again.
Yeah. Well, I got some friends in the trade, so I can call on them.
Absolutely, 100%. So, like I was saying, though, when you look at it, and we got the home inspection, we're willing to accept some defects in the property. We got our pre-approval. We got tight conditions as far as not a whole bunch of extra stuff that we really don't need, because with these two, you're fully protected, right? Yeah. And then we come in with at least you're probably going to be double on your deposit compared to every other offer out there. And we're going to come in with a blank possession date and not asking for any extras. You see how we're going to stand out compared to everybody else? And that's what we've learned over the years, and that's how we've been able to help our buyers succeed in tight markets when we're in competition, and get the maximum best purchase price when we're in a little bit more of a buyer's market. Because we have the ability to show that, hey, we got a substantial buyer and we're willing to accept some good stuff, right?
Okay.
So that's basically the presentation in a nutshell. Is there anything that you would have wanted to discuss?
No, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah, it was a lot of information in a short period of time, and I really appreciate you coming in. And then the only thing that we would, if I'm going to be the right person for you, if Lethbridge Real Estate is going to be the right person for you going forward into this purchase, then we would just get into a service agreement. And what that means is that you're going to commit to me, and I'm going to commit to you. Just like in that fiduciary duties, when we're talking about loyalty, we ask for your loyalty back. And that's just simply saying that it's an exclusive relationship between us, and that we're going to be the ones helping you succeed in this purchase transaction.
I'm comfortable with that.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks again for coming in.
Right.
Really appreciate it.
Ryan, I really appreciate you coming in. So I had a chance to look at the house,
Yeah.
and what we do is completely different than any other real estate company. We were taught, and they are still teaching it this way, to come up with a value. The system is you look at 3 properties that are for sale, 3 properties that are sold, and in this market, 3 properties that expired. But in this market, there is no such thing as an expired listing, right?
Yeah.
So the problem with that concept is that's how appraisers work mostly. See, the only thing that really counts in today's market is what is your competition. What's sold yesterday doesn't matter. Buyer can't buy it. Yeah. And we get that from realtors all the time when we're marketing properties, and they come in and say to us, well, here's my offer, and it's lower because the other 2 sold for lower. And my response is, then go buy one of the other 2. And, well, we can't. Well,
That's
right?
the point. Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
It's important to look at our competition and see how good a competition they are, if they help us or hurt us. All right? And then my job is to give you enough information to make an informed decision. So when we look at these comparable properties, considering what your features are and these features are, we want to come up with a range. And I always look at and say, everybody has an opinion on what their house is worth. But what I like to say is, I want to give you a conservative number and an optimistic number. Conservative is, you won the lottery, hey, I'm out of Dodge, let's get it sold. Optimistic is, if the planets align and the buyer is in love with it, we're going to get top dollar. So let's take a look at a couple of these properties.
Okay.
This one here is on the west side, very similar in the sense that it's a bi-level. It's in Mount Blackiston. It's in a similar location to yours,
Yep.
Not the exact same neighborhood,
Yep.
but square footage is pretty close. We're sitting at just under 1,000 square feet,
Yeah,
developed
that was pretty
basement.
close,
Okay, so they've been on the market now for 5 days. They're at 410,000.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage that we have here is that we've got a walkout basement.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I really liked that when I bought it.
Yeah. So when we look at this one, it's only been on the market for 5 days. This is going to present some competition for us, but I think that ours is, because you've done some recent renovations and with that walkout.
Mm-hmm. I think we're a little more attractive.
I think we're going to be.
Price, yeah.
So Mohawk, this other one, the Mohawk. Okay, again, it's sitting around the same square footage, just a little bit bigger at 1,040 square feet. Mohawk's a little bit older in age, built in 1982, and they're on the market at 415,000. They've been on the market 12 days.
Yeah.
Now, it's back in the olden days, when it took 3 to 3 months to sell a house, 2 to 3 months to sell a house. You look at something that's been on the market 12 days, and you're going, wow, big deal.
Yeah.
But in our market, if it's not gone in the first 30 days, that's usually an indication of we missed it on price, or there's a change in the marketplace. And we'll understand that once we've been on the market more. So that's been on the market now for 12 days at 415,000. Again, we got the walkout, they got the developed basement as well, but we shine simply because little bit better location and with the walkout basement. And then here's our most serious competition. This one's on Pagan Court. And this has a walkout basement. It's just been recently remodeled. Disadvantage, or the advantage to you, is this one is empty. So sometimes an empty house will show a little weaker than one that's lived in. All the flaws will show up. Although they went through and painted and things like that, it still doesn't have the same feeling walking into a house that's lived in.
Yeah, for sure.
That's been on the market now 19 days. It's at $415,000. So all of your competition is sitting between $410,000 and $415,000.
Okay.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you walked in here, what did you think top dollar for your house was?
You know, yeah, considering I put a lot of work into it. You know, I've updated the furnace. The roof's only about 10 years old. You know, I put a lot of love into that house over the last 10 years. So I was kind of hoping and thinking that top dollar would be 420.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, this is an interesting exercise because nobody can tell you exactly what your house is going to sell for.
Oh no?
No, nobody can tell you. An appraiser can't tell you because the price is determined by you and the buyer. Okay? You between the two of you, you determine the market value.
Okay, that makes sense.
There's three prices for anything you're going to sell. There's retail, and that's what we talked about. Buyer walks in, they're transferred to Lethbridge, mom loves a house, they're qualified, they gotta have it. Okay? They'll pay top dollar. Wholesale is 75 cents on the dollar. Okay? You win the lottery, you say, I don't care, get rid of the house, I'll take whatever, I'm going to Hawaii. So that's 75 cents on the dollar. And retail, to determine your asking price, you take two things. You take time and competition. You give me enough time. So retail, we're at 420, right?
Yeah.
That's what you mentioned?
Yeah.
Top dollar. There is one person out there, and I can sell it for 420 because there's one person out there that'll pay it. What I need is, I need enough time to find that person. Okay. So you give me the time, I can get you the money. And that's also governed by competition. We have competition probably from one house, it's priced at $415,000.
Yeah, we're pretty similar with the
Yeah.
walkout, and they've done some updates. So yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
okay. But again, you give me enough time, and the competition we know is only one house, I can get you that $420,000. Now, what happens is I need to know what I call, when do you need the money, honey? Okay?
Okay.
When do you need the money, honey? So you tell me a date. You say, look, I've got to have the money by this date. That's how I determine the marketing procedure, where we need to start at and where we go. So it's
Yeah. So yeah. So we're moving out of Lethbridge, going into Calgary, and so being that it's right at the end of the school season, we need to be up there and settled in Calgary. I'd say probably no later than August 1st to August 15th. So we're set up and ready to go for school for September 1.
okay. So if you're telling me you got to have the money by August 15th,
Yeah, that'd be the latest.
okay, that means I have to have it sold by July 15th.
Why July 15th?
Because once the property is sold, there's that lead time between, okay, I bought the house, now I get to move in. And that's usually 3 to 4 weeks. So, by the time we negotiate it,
Oh, I see. Like it needs to be a
right,
final
when you
deal by the
bought it,
15th.
right?
Yeah, okay.
So when you bought it, you got conditions removed, and then a couple weeks to a
Yeah.
month later, you moved in.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So if you want the money by August 15th, I've got to have it sold by July 15th.
yeah, okay.
Okay, that basically gives us a month. Now we're in a good market, but a month is still
It's still pretty tight.
still pretty tight.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at, well, let's look at it this way. If 420 is retail, wholesale then is 75 cents on the dollar. So 75 cents on the dollar, let's even just do it simple, say 20%, so that's 80, that's $100,000. So I can have it sold tonight for 320. Are you prepared to take 320?
Not a chance.
Not a chance?
Not a chance.
It says right here in the form, if the seller's willing to take wholesale, buy it.
Well, yeah, well, that makes sense because 320.
320, yeah.
I'll buy it again for 320.
So Somewhere between 320 and 420, we know what's going to sell.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
There's your conservative, there's your optimistic.
Yep.
Given the time frame, so that's why I talk about time frame. You give me enough time, I can get you 420.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, our time frame got shrunk because we got to sell it in 30 days. Where do you think we need to price it to get the kind of action we want to get?
Well, yeah, from what you're talking about and looking at what's on the market, I would say we need to be at this guy or below this guy to be more attractive. That's the only thing that makes sense, right? So, you know, maybe somewhere between 410 and 412, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I think realistically, we could be real close to his price.
Yeah.
Because then it's going to turn down, it's going to be which one did they love more?
Okay.
And $2,000 or $3,000 is not going to change their mind.
Okay.
If we were $2,000 or $3,000 less, then what I would say is we go on at, you know what? That's at 415. Let's go 414.9.
Okay, yeah.
You know, just it's a little thing,
yeah,
right? But all we want to do is get them to look at ours at the same time. And why give up a couple $1,000s before we started negotiations?
That's true.
If they like that house better and buy it, then our competition's gone.
That's also
All right?
true. Yeah.
Now, should we start running out of time, because we got that July 15th target, you're always in control of how fast this sells. The closer you move to wholesale, the quicker it'll sell. That's not rocket science, right?
Yeah.
So if that, well, again, you're in control. What we will do is we'll give you feedback on every showing.
Yeah.
And to be honest, most of the feedback is not going to be very good because the realtors don't want to say too much about their clients.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I have a saying that buyers make offers, lookers complain. So if we get feedback and it's saying, oh, I didn't like this, I didn't like that, then I'll go, okay, I'll ask the agent, so where's the offer? Oh, they're not going to write an offer, they're not ready. They've got to fix their credit problem. Well, that's not a buyer, that's a looker.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So I don't put a lot of stock in the feedback unless the feedback comes back and says, hey, do you think they would?
Oh, okay.
Doesn't matter what they would be. Would they paint their bedroom? Would they do this? Would they leave the appliances? Right? That's a buyer because
Okay.
they're making serious inquiries.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what I say is, you know what? Put it on paper.
Yeah.
Because I can't really go to the seller and start negotiations when it's a maybe.
No, for sure.
Right?
I wouldn't be too happy if we had an in-depth conversation and
And then
nothing
all of a
shows
sudden,
up.
nothing, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think we've determined our asking price. Now, so that's the evaluation worksheet. You understand how that works?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right?
Yep.
Now, let me talk to you about what causes a house to sell. It's been our experience over the course of my career that there are certain things that affect how a house sells, how fast it sells, and how much money you get. I want to talk to you about that.
Okay.
This takes, we've got our parameters, so we understand where we sit in the marketplace. Now we look at it and say, what can we do that's going to make our house stand out over anybody else's or can influence in the marketplace? So the first one we start off with, are we priced between wholesale and retail?
Well, I think we are. I mean, yeah, we might be a little bit closer to the retail side, but you know, when we look at the competition that you showed me, I think-
Between wholesale and retail, wholesale's 320 and we're going on 419.9. We pretty much have to face the music. We're at retail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay? And that's fine because we're looking at our competition. So no. So one of the things that we want to do with this is see how many yeses we can get.
Okay.
It's important in the first few to try and get at least 2 of them.
Okay.
Okay? Because these are the most important. The next one I call face the music. List it with a built-in price reduction. So we've got 30 days to sell the house. If we don't have an offer in 2 weeks, are you prepared to drop the price?
Yeah, we got no choice. We're moving.
Okay? So that's cast in stone, that's July 15th.
Yeah.
Okay? You got to have the money August 15th.
Yeah.
There's no way that mom and dad or anybody can bridge you.
Yeah, we might. Yeah, there might be some ways, but ideally we want.
That's our goal.
That's the goal.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the
so
goal.
my job is to help you reach your goal.
Yeah.
If you were prepared to reduce the price in 2 weeks, I'm going to tell you one thing right now. Unless you're going to drop it a minimum of 5%, don't drop it because it doesn't matter. if you're going to drop the price, I'm going to tell you right now, the minimum you have to drop is 5% to make a difference. Okay? So 5% would put us right under that 400 mark at 399.9.
Okay.
Are you prepared to do that?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, we'd like to get over the 400 mark, but you know, if we can't make something work with, you know, extra help, then yep, we'd be prepared to do that.
All right. And then one of the things we'll do is I will send you a form to get signed, and we'll predate it. If an offer comes in, we don't have to go through with that.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Inspection report. So every buyer is going to make their offer subject to a home inspection report. The problem is with home inspectors is there's about 15 of them in Lethbridge, and it's like anything else. You know, there are mechanics that are great mechanics, and there are mechanics that got through school. We don't know. We have a pretty good idea who the best ones are, but we don't get to pick the home inspector. The buyer picks the home inspector. But also one of the things is what we want to do when we're representing the house is to remove objections from offers.
Okay.
So let's say they come in and you got a hot water tank that is 20 years old. Okay, and the home inspector comes back and goes, "Oh, this thing's on its last legs." The buyer's going to look at that and he's going to say, "Okay, well, I want a new hot water tank." What we don't know, we don't know. So what I'm suggesting is we invest $600 into a home inspection that can make us money or save us from a deal falling apart.
Okay.
So if we invest that money and he comes back and he comes with a list of laundry items that are minor objections that are easy to fix, say they cost $1,000, $2,000, those will remove objections and gives the buyer less ammunition to come in with a lower offer.
Okay.
So that's an investment in a property that could really literally save you a transaction or make you some money.
Okay.
Would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I will set that up. Above market commission. This is one thing I'm going to answer for you. I'm going to say no.
Oh, okay.
The reason for that is there's a reason to use an incentive like offering the other realtor more money to sell it, but that's more effective in a buyer's market than in a seller's market.
Yeah.
We know we've only got one competitor really, so I would take that money that say we were going to offer a little incentive for a realtor, because realtors for the most part get to pick the first houses that the client's looking at. So the client comes in, says, "Hey, this is the price range, I want to be on the west side." And so he's going to go through and start picking out houses. When he looks at the commission, sometimes he moves that houses up to the front. Okay? I'm not saying all the realtors do it, but some of the realtors do it. And we don't know who's going to sell the house. So the theory behind offering that is that we want to be in that first group of houses that they show.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, with only one competitor,
Yeah.
I don't think it's an effective marketing tool.
That makes sense.
Okay, and we're investing the money in the home inspection, so I think that's better. Now, this is one that's really, because of the market, has really been a winner for us. What we want to do is we want to stage it. So we hit the market on a Friday, and during that period of time, like today is Sunday, so it's going to give us 4 or 5 days to get everything ready. We can get the home inspection done, we can get the house all set up, and we can start talking to the neighbors. So we're going to slip a little sign in the front yard a couple days before it actually goes live. And we want to go around and talk to the neighbors before that sign goes up and get them involved in the marketing. Because I think you mentioned to me that you got some good friends in the area.
Yeah, Bill lives next door. He's been awesome, and yeah, Nancy and Fred are just down the road too, and they've been great. Everybody's been great, but those are the two I really got along with. Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is sit down with you and get a list of the neighbors that you know.
Okay.
Then we want to go around and personally invite them to a special open house just for friends and family.
Oh, okay.
Okay, friends and neighborhood, let's say.
Yeah.
So we're going to have an open house. It's going to hit the market on a Friday. So it's brand new to the market. We're going to have an open house Saturday. Noon to 1 will be for the neighbors to come through. And then from 1 to 2 will be for the public. Because if we can get, a lot of times people like to shop in neighborhoods where their friends are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if we can get them involved in the marketing and they get to bring a friend in and that friend's ends up buying, everybody wins, everybody's excited, right?
Yeah.
So we want to go around, let them know about it first before the sign goes up, so it's news. Then get the sign up, get them all excited about the open house. We come in, we put up anywhere between 10 and 15 signs. We put it up at 9 o'clock in the morning of the open house. The average realtor, and I don't know if you've been to any open houses, but the average realtor is going to put up 2 or 3 signs, and he's going to put them up 20 minutes before the open house. Then he's going to run through, turn on the lights. He's going to have a whole bunch of copies of the listing, what they call a feature sheet, and people are going to walk in the door. The problem with that is, why is he investing 2 hours of his time or more without a guarantee of success? Likely is that the owner said to him, what are you going to do to sell my house? Well, I'll have an open house. So he's not there because he wants to be there. He's there because he needs to be there.
Okay.
What we like to do is use it as a marketing approach and say, what we are going to do is create some excitement. Besides what we do in a neighborhood, we also inform all of our clients that live in the area. Hey, there's a new house on the market. You have a friend looking. We send them out a blast inviting them. So they're part of the 1 hour open house. So we treat that as a marketing opportunity. That's why the sign goes up at 9. And we have a sign on the front lawn that says text for times. Open house, text for times. So we want to create traffic before the open house.
Yeah, okay.
And if they're texting, then we know there are people coming. Well, what's the price? What's going on, right?
Yep.
And that's what we want to do. We want to create some excitement. We've changed the way we've been doing that. Open houses used to be a loss leader, but now because of the market, because there's more buyers than there are sellers, we want to get them in the house. The last one we did, that was and it was back in the winter, and it was funny because $950,000 house. It's not like you're going to expect a whole bunch of people to be tromping through the door.
Yeah.
And we had the open house, and 15 minutes into the open house, my son and I are looking at each other and we're going, "That's pretty quiet."
Yeah.
Then the floodgates open.
Oh, really?
Right? There was like from 1:15, well, from 12:15 to almost 2:30. It was supposed to go to 2 to almost 2:30. There was always at least one group of people in there, sometimes 4 groups.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't a pleasant day. It was cold, it was winter, and it resulted in an offer the very next day.
Cool.
So that person didn't get the house, but it created the activity that we wanted,
Yep.
right? So that's what we want to do. We've turned an open house from, I don't want to be there, but the owner wants me to be there, to I want to be there. I want to meet the neighbors, and I want the neighbors to bring a buyer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's we're pretty excited about it. The staging
We got
consultant.
another yes there, yeah.
Yes, we do. The staging consultant, the way you guys got the house, I'm not worried about that. If it goes empty, that's something we're going to have to talk about. We'll revisit it. Right now, we'll say no.
Okay.
But worst case scenario, you got to move,
Yeah.
right? House goes empty, then that's something we'll need to talk about. I mean, we're going to be doing a lot of talking over the next couple of weeks because we got a tight deadline here, so we're going to be on this real hard.
Okay.
Okay. Improvements. I would have to go with a no on that one too because there's everything's good in the house. You've taken good care of it.
Yeah, we've done some updates. So.
Now here's one, and so let me ask you a simple question. It's called trade terms.
Mm-hmm.
So if a guy comes in with an offer and says, here's the price, it's the price you want, but I got a problem. I got a house to sell, or I've got a mobile or a RV, right? I've got a fifth wheel trailer. If I could sell those things, I could buy your house. So if another guy came in and said, hey, I'll buy your house if you buy my house, well, what's your first response?
No.
The last thing you need is another real estate problem,
Yeah,
right?
No, I'm trying to get out of this problem.
Yeah.
And get out of the city.
That's where Uncle Miles steps in.
Okay.
Uncle Miles steps in and goes, hey, we'll buy your house because you know what? I'll buy anything at wholesale.
Well, okay. Yeah,
All
that
right?
makes sense. Mhm.
Now, if you can swing it, I tell you to buy it,
Yeah,
or
no,
you
yeah.
want to call mom and dad.
Yeah.
But worst case scenario, what we do in our marketing is I say seller will take trades.
Okay.
The reason I say seller will take trades, I can't say I will take trades because the real estate board in their wisdom has decided it wasn't unfair that because nobody else can do it. Well, they can, but they just won't put the money out.
Okay.
So I say sell it with take trades, and you always get first dibs on the property or whatever it is. If you don't
Okay.
want it, then I'll buy it.
Okay.
I have done motorhomes, I've done boats, I've done houses. Like it's, you know, we never know when it's going to work, but when
Yep.
it works, it's really sweet.
Okay.
So that's another yes.
Yep.
Okay. Pre-order the appraisal. That's not an effective marketing tool in the market that we're in.
Yeah,
The
okay.
market's moving too fast, so that's an easy no. Worded to sell. So what I want you to do, you've been in a house for about 10 years now. You've got some great neighbors. I want you to write a little story for me, just to say, you know, hey, this is what we really. What are you going to miss about the house? What are you going to miss about the neighborhood?
Okay.
So we want to add a little personal feeling to it. So in our marketing, we want to include some of those things.
Okay.
Okay? So it's called Worded to Sell. And I'm going to jump over to the social media too. You're on Facebook?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, and that kind of thing. Talk about it. Get it out there. Okay? So we got 2 yeses right there. We'll jump down to that one, the social media one. That's a powerful tool. No contingencies. That's pretty easy.
What does that mean?
So let's say you had a buddy of yours at work and said, "Boy, if you're ever going to sell your house, I'd like to buy it." Does that happen?
Yeah, I've heard of it happen. Not for me, but yeah,
Okay.
I've heard of
So that comes around once in a while, and when I'm in that situation, because people say, "Gee, I really like your house. If you're going to sell, let me know." Then I'll say, "You know what? Put their feet to the fire." Say, "Absolutely. I've just signed a listing agreement with Miles. It takes effect in 5 days. So if you're serious, you make an offer."
Oh,
And I'll work with Miles to get you the house, and you got first dibs. But after that goes on the open market. Now you'll find out if they're serious.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
prepared to work with that?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So we don't have a contingency. Yard sign, that's a given.
Yep.
Correct? Commit to the home sellers tips. That's just little things on make sure the bed's made and the kitchen's clean, that kind of stuff. I'll give you that tip sheet. The rest of them are pretty easy. Additional extras including the price.
Well, I'm leaving everything anyhow because the house we're
There you go.
buying, like, yeah, fridge, stove, washer, dryer, they're all staying.
Okay. Another one is assist in closing costs. In the price range they're in, if they're buying a $400,000 house and they can't afford the lawyer,
They probably can't afford the house.
they probably can't afford the house.
Yeah,
So
makes
we don't. That's an easy no. Easy accessibility. Any problems with 3-hour notice to get into the house or
Oh, no,
short?
no, that's
okay.
easy. Yeah.
Perfect. Another yes. And no panic phrases. I don't know if you've seen this, and you don't see it too much in this market, but on MLS listings, sometimes they'll say seller is motivated.
Oh, really?
Okay. You know what that says to me?
Make a low ball offer?
Bring me a wholesale price, right? So
Yeah, I
when
don't
I
want that.
when I see those, I always throw in an offer at that wholesale price, just get their attention. That doesn't help you at all.
No.
Okay, let's count how many yeses we got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 10 yeses out of 22. That's fantastic. We're well on our way to a sale.
Right on.
Okay?
Appreciate it.
All right, well, thanks very much, guys. Now you've seen the buyer's presentation in its full form for the most part. We kind of skipped through the bio process because we are role playing and we don't really going out there with them. And then obviously we've seen Miles' side on the seller's side. So
The end goal here is that we give you enough information to make an informed decision and that we will always have your back. And we'll always tell the truth.